right. All right. Hello, and welcome to our third free CE webinar of the 23-24 season. This is one I've been really looking forward to. I'm excited about this one. We're going to introduce you to some of the most popular devices your students are bringing to courses. And we have an awesome panel here. We've got representatives from the big manufacturers, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their products. But first, as usual, you'll be hearing from me for a few minutes. For those I haven't met yet, I'm Emma Walker, Aries Program Manager, and most of my job is in the curriculum sphere, but I do a lot with instructor continuing professional development as well. This year, I'm really excited to bring you, I know some of you have participated in previous webinars where we had one of these folks or one or two of these folks talk about their products, and those are great. I also know that it's really tough to make the time to attend 5 different webinars. So these folks have graciously agreed to all be in the same space for one evening. And in fact, we met earlier in the week. They all play very nicely in the sandbox together. So I have high hopes for how this is going to go. I really appreciate, just before we get started, I want to say that I do really appreciate having these folks from who manufacture competing products be willing to be here for the betterment of avalanche education, and to move things along for ARI instructors. It's really cool to see you all wanting to get that education out the door in front of worrying about competition. I know you have products to sell, but it's really awesome to see this happening. And we haven't had a chance to do something like this before. So it's really cool to see, and we really appreciate it. For those who attended the Comparing Mapping Apps webinar last Thursday, we're going to go in a really similar format. Obviously, we have some different questions, but we're going to start off with a little bit of context, and then each of these folks is going to give a quick demo or let us know about one of their most popular products or a new product. While they're talking, I'm going to be filling out a cheat sheet. I know you haven't seen the mapping one yet. We're just waiting on those folks to approve the language, and then we'll send it out. So we'll have those for you next week. So a little bit of context. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. By remaining in the webinar, you're consenting to be part of a recorded session. Your name and or voice will only appear if you ask a question at the end of the session. So otherwise, stay on the line if you're okay with being recorded. So tonight, we're going to talk about comparing the most popular transceivers that are on the market. And the reason for this is that you as instructors are already really familiar with at least one of the devices that you're going to hear about tonight, I'm certain, as your go-to for personal and or professional use. You know the ins and outs of your transceiver and know its functions backwards and forwards and can troubleshoot in the field if necessary. So certainly if your student shows up with the same transceiver that you're used to using, you would be able to help them troubleshoot that. Of course, we never know what students are going to show up with. I was telling Bruce in our practice session earlier this week that I had a student on a rescue course a couple years ago show up with an ancient Tracker 1 that I have to admit functioned exactly as it was supposed to. But, we obviously recommend that folks are updating those devices a little more frequently than this Tracker 1 was honestly probably about my age. So it was time to go to the Beacon retirement home. But we really need instructors to be familiar with whatever beacons their students are going to show up with. And I've gotten feedback from a lot of you over the past several years that there are a couple manufacturers or a couple models that you're like, ooh, when somebody shows up with this, I really have to scratch my head and play around with it. And it would be great to have a little more familiarity. So ask and you shall receive. That's why we're putting this together. This is a chance to learn about some of the most common products on the market so that you can teach them to your students and help them troubleshoot. So I just want to give you kind of a sense of what to expect this evening. For the purposes of a recreational course, you can probably, for the most part, use your expertise because you've probably interacted with a lot of different devices to figure things out on the fly, even if students are using a device you've never encountered before. But we want to make that a little bit easier for you because you have 8 million other things to think about when you're teaching a rec course. So we're going to go over kind of some of the basics of these devices tonight. So each of these folks are going to give us an 8 to 10 minute presentation about some of their most popular products or a new product. And they're all going to cover kind of the same general topics. So we're going to talk about switching between functions, range and those search and find search modes, flagging, auto revert screen and how it delivers information, including if you are getting electromagnetic interference, how you would get that information from your device, the manufacturer's recommendations for how to wear, whether that's a pocket or a harness, and any special features these folks want to let us know about. Whatever I've asked them to also give us, if there's anything in particular they want to make sure you know and can tell students about their devices. I want to make sure they get a chance to tell you that as well. And then, of course, there are some limitations that apply to all devices. We're going to talk a little bit. We're not going to talk about that in this session, but in every fall, AREA sends an email to our student list, which is about 60,000 people. And that goes out, and there's some comparison between how often and how to update your device, and or when it needs to be retired and replaced. So also that email talks some about caring for your device. And of course, all of these devices are going to last longer and work better as life-saving technology if you take proper care of them. And that, of course, applies to all of the devices you're going to hear about this evening. I am going to ask folks to let us know whether lithium batteries are an acceptable power source for their devices, because they don't perform as well in the cold. That's often a question. So we'll talk about power source and charging. And then, of course, we all outlive our usefulness, beacons included. So we'll talk about retirement and software updates later on in this session. So in just a second, I'm going to introduce you to each of these folks. I'm going to tell you who's here, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So, and then they're each going to give their presentations. I'm going to have some round robin style questions for them. And then we're going to work to wrap up in time to make sure that you all have an opportunity to ask questions of them directly. At the end, I'll make sure also when I send out the follow-up email that includes that resource and the recording from tonight, I'll make sure that I also I'll copy these folks so that if you have an individual question for any of them, for any of the manufacturers, they can answer that for you. Sorry, guys, I should have told you that I was planning to do that. So if anyone's conspicuously left off the list, you'll know who said, don't have people email me directly. Just kidding. You've all always been very helpful about that sort of thing. So we'll make sure you can get in touch with folks directly if you have questions. Let's see. Now my slides aren't advancing. This always happens. Okay. That should work. Okay, great. So I'm going to just have each of these folks, we'll go in the order that we see on the screen. So I'll just shout out who I would like to introduce themselves. So I'm going to have folks say your name and the company you work for, your role there, and where you are based. Where in the world are you? Awesome. Jeremy, let's start with you.
Gotcha. You hear me okay?
Yep.
Hey, everyone. My name is Jeremy Jolly. I'm the U.S. market manager for ARVA. ARVA is a 35-year company, but we relaunched in the U.S. With the owner about 15 years ago, and I've been with the company since then. I have had a couple of different capacities in the winter sports world as a tech rep and sales, and that kind of brought me into this. And we are still a family company, and we have a tight focus on product. And I'm based in Orem, Utah, and that's where we run our operations for the U.S.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce Edgerly here. I'm the co-founder of BCA, Backcountry Access, and we're in Boulder, Colorado. I'm now the brand ambassador. So I do things like this, and then I go skiing.
That sounds like a great gig, Edge.
Yeah, it's good. It's too good to be true. I guess that's good enough for now?
That'll work. Yeah. And did you say, sorry, where are you based?
We're in Boulder, Colorado. Yeah.
Okay.
And we make the tracker avalanche transceivers.
Including the Tracker 1, which there's still plenty floating around out there.
We never had a Tracker 1. It's called the Tracker.
Just the Tracker, sorry. The OG Tracker, got it.
And that stands for Digital Transceiving System. Originally, we thought we were going to create a whole new category called Digital Transceiving Systems, kind of like GPS, global positioning system, but it didn't catch on. Oh, well.
Okay, so now we're numbering them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. See, I knew I'd get a good transceiver history lesson tonight. All right, Mammut folks, Jake and or Doug, whoever is currently here. Both of these guys are on dad duty tonight, so we'll see who we got.
Hi there, Doug Workman. I'll try to fix it, but right now my screen is showing me as Jake. I wasn't struggling with the Zoom, but I'm based in Jackson and I'm a mountain guide and I work as Mammoth's Avalanche Safety Program Manager. And we make the Verivox beacons. And that's about it. Yeah, I'm on dad duty.
Sweet. Thanks, Doug. I changed your name and everything.
Oh, look at that.
And Jake.
Well, I was honored to briefly share my name with Doug. It's memorable. My name is Jake Gaventa. I work with Mammut and the marketing department. I head our partnerships for North America. I'm based out in the suburbs of Nederland, Colorado, and I'm an ARI course leader and an AMGA ski guide, which means essentially nothing because I'm mostly good at emails and spreadsheets these days. But I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. All right, Ortavox folks, Greg and Tom.
I'll get started. Hello there, everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar. Yep, Ortavox USA is based in Boulder, Colorado. Tom is down there. I'm up in the mountains. My role here is direct sales, so I manage our professional channels and with our professional partnerships. So stoked to have you guys here tonight and to learn more about the direct voice. Turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Ari, for organizing, and thanks everybody for attending. I'm Tom Mason. I am the United States brand manager for Ortavox. I'm really interested tonight to see where the transceiver discussion goes. And as Emma mentioned before, we do have our philosophical differences, but I think there's one thing that we can agree on, that we can all be more civil than Ramaswamy and Haley were last night. So that's a bar we need to surpass. That level. We'll be okay.
I'm gonna do my best to rule this debate with an iron fist so we can just keep things moving along. But I'm not especially. You all have, when it comes to wrangling cats, this group has been pretty easy. So, all right, and last but certainly not least, from the Peeps crew, Mike.
Thanks. And I apologize. My camera, for whatever reason, is not working. I don't know. Can you guys see me?
No, I can't see you.
Because it shows it's working. It says it is, but anyways,
Oh,
I'm hoping that at least the screen share will work. But at any rate, I'll run through this. And so I'm Mike Hattrop, and I'm the business unit director at Black Diamond for the snow category. And so that's R&D for all of the hard goods. So it's skis, poles, skins, beacon, shovel, probe, airbags. And that's of course both for Black Diamond beacons as well as Peeps, and we're located in Salt Lake, and I'm in Ketchum half the time. I was remote for 27 years before anyone was remote, and now everybody's remote, and I got to commute. So that's how it works.
Thanks, Mike. Let's see. Mike, I was planning to have us go in reverse order, which
So
would put
let me see if I can share my screen.
Okay,
that
let's
will
try
help,
it.
But it says I can't share while another participant is sharing. So maybe you have to
probably because I'm
unshare.
sharing. One moment, please.
Okay.
I'm usually the problem. Okay, try now.
So are you guys seeing my screen?
I am not. Let me just make sure. I don't see anything about screen share here. You might try.
Maybe come back to me. Let me see if I can figure it out.
Did you
Okay.
check your system preferences, Mike, for sharing on Zoom and
I just figured this
security.
out while we were in our
Yeah, you need to
meeting.
go into your privacy settings on your system preferences if you have a Mac.
I don't, but
So here's what I'm going to do. Look, this is me taking command of the situation. Ortavox folks, I bet you're ready to go first. Would that work?
We're always ready.
Okay, great. So we'll have Greg and Tom present, and then I'm going to mute while you all are presenting. And then Mike, I'm going to shoot you a text and we'll figure out how we're going to get you squared away, and then we'll have you go next.
thank you.
Look at that, taking charge. All right, here we go. Greg,
Okay,
it's all you.
ready to go. Sharing my screen. Here we go. Everyone can see this? Thumbs
Yep.
up? Okay, great. So we're going to take you through the direct voice, but rather than just going right into functionality, we're going to tell you a story about the development background, because then you're going to see how all the functions flowed from what our development goal was. So Ortavox had 9 years to work on this project to design a new avalanche transceiver, and it became clear to them at the beginning that their #1 development goal would be to, here, let me actually play this for you. So we just have a single screen. So their #1 development goal was, as you can see here, to make the best rescue tool to be useful for the greatest number of users. And what we learned over 9 years was during our research is, as you can see here from some of the surveys that were done, that nearly half of the users that were surveyed had very little avalanche knowledge or zero avalanche knowledge. We also have just learned this year as a touch point in a study that even those who take avalanche courses, avalanche students, the majority of them are practicing none at all, or at most 1 or 2 times with their rescue gear. So what we know is that people don't practice, they're much more likely to be negatively affected by stress and to have their performance negatively affected. So all of this guided Ortavox's development mission, where we knew we needed to create a transceiver that would be the simplest and easiest to use under the impact of stress. But how to do that? So what we learned here is we went to psychologists, and we learned from psychologists the power of voice, and that verbal information is easier to process, cognitively easier to process than visual information. And learning this is why we ended up putting verbal support into the beacon. So the direct voice, which was the result, has verbal support in all phases of search mode. It's the only one to verbally support the rescuer. And as a result, now it's in its 3rd season of use. We're going into its 3rd season, and it's demonstrated that with its calm, clear verbal commands, it reduces stress and improves search times and brings technology that is for the benefit of the greatest number of users. So the direct voice was the result, and that was a little bit of the development background there. And you're going to notice how all of these features here are all targeted to maintain this goal of ours to be simple and easy to use. So when a student shows up, if they have never used the device before or get confused, let's just take you through some of the functionality to it. So starting with powering it on and switching from send to search mode. The buttons are separated. So the on-off button is on the back, and it's intentionally that way, so it's separated from the search mode. On the front, you'll just see one button, a flagging button, and the search tab is super easy to identify. In fact, a lot of our professionals who use it, they like the fact that it's very clearly identifiable when their student is in search. And at the beginning of a search, they can really clearly see with the direct voice that the user is in search and is no longer sending a signal. So super simple and efficient, intuitive buttons. All right, so let's go into the verbal support now, which is the most important thing, and search mode. And so, as I mentioned, there's verbal support in all 3 phases. So when you're in signal search mode, it's going to direct you to run in 50-meter search strips or 20-meter search strips. You will get that verbal information. So what you're going to learn here is that not only does it navigate you, but it provides you with the proper technique and what you should be doing at each stage of the search. Once you acquire a signal, you'll get verbal support as well, matching the directional arrows, telling you which direction to continue or to change direction. If you follow the arrow and you keep the arrow at the top of the screen, it's not going to continue to give you information. It'll only give you actionable information to keep you on the flux line. But as you're going to learn here in a little bit, that is key. Once you learn to trust the voice navigation, it frees up your senses, it frees up your vision to use in better ways. Also now once you're off the flux line and you're coming in to fine search mode, it guides you in, it gives you a couple of directions, one of them going down to the snow surface. So again, to perform the proper technique, and the screen clears up in search mode, and you do continue to get verbal support here if you overshoot in pinpoint mode, if you overshoot the signal. So end result of this is all three phases. You get verbal support, you get correctional support if you stray from the flux line. And yeah, moving along here, we're going to keep this under 8 minutes. So you might be wondering, what is the range and how do we identify range? So for Ortovox, how we identify range is by search strip width. We don't list a range like some of the other manufacturers do. That is a flux line range. It's all about using range in a search strip width. And for us, it's 50 meters. So that's what you're going to see advertised. But a little bit about range for us is that during the development process, again, to make this transceiver of the most use for the greatest number of people, we wanted to optimize signal stability over range. And we only wanted to have range if it was stable. So what you're going to see here is 50 meter search strip width, which equates to roughly 30 to 40 meters on a flux line. And what we have discovered in Ortovox, who's been making beacons since 1980, understands that at greater ranges of over 40 and 50 meters, the more likely it is that the signal will be unstable. And that unstable signals, as professionals know through lots of experience, requires lots of training and experience to interpret correctly. Likewise, a large search strip width also requires a lot of practice and patience to execute in the field. Two things that we're not seeing our users have. So we would rather have them, if they don't have the experience to interpret unstable signals, we'd rather give them only stable signals with a more stable range. We can go into more of that later. We're going to keep moving on. So flagging. So the direct voice can flags at a 5 meter range. It can flag 4 signals consecutively and maintain them. There's no timing out. As long as the signals are within range, you can flag 4 signals. They will appear as you see here to the left on your screen. A little bit about the screen itself. You might notice how clean and large it is. Again, to the development goal. We wanted to have minimal icons. Like for instance, we don't show the battery strength on the screen when you are in search mode. There's no need to clutter the screen with that information. It's a non-segmented screen. So you'll see here the arrow, the directional arrow has almost an infinite 360-degree number of possibilities, meaning it can point backwards, forwards. It's not a set segmented screen. Auto revert is standard on the direct voice. It is 120 seconds, 2 minutes, which is motion activated. It is active in search mode and in standby mode, which I'm going to describe to you as a special feature here in a little bit. As you can see, we actually have an alarm and a countdown notifying the user that auto revert is in progress, and when it hits 0, then it'll revert back to send. Here you can see the beacon is in standby mode. It's not in search mode, and it's about to go back into send. So talking about EMI, electronic magnetic interference, we use the same 20-50 rule as all the other manufacturers do in terms of removing interference. There's 2 ways that you can tell interference on the screen. When you're sending a signal, if there's interference, you'll see a triangle that'll say send interrupted, meaning the transmission of the signal is interrupted by interference. There's actually an alarm that goes along with that too. So it alerts the user to be aware of potential interference and to remove sources of it. or to cycle it back on and off again. So your step would be you can hit the flagging button that mutes the notification, and then take the proper actions of moving away from interference, cycling it on and off. And then I will tell you, if you continue to get the send interrupted and you're in a clean environment and you've done your due diligence, that is an indication it could have failed and needs to be inspected, but only after you've done your due diligence. In search mode, I've already mentioned how it can reduce the search strip width to 20 meters, and it'll identify that on the screen in signal search mode. We've now, with our newest update, the 2.1 update, we have added another visual notification to the screen when you're in search mode. If there's interference, it will, I don't have a picture of it here, I couldn't find one, but it will alert the user to move 50 centimeters away from sources of interference. So you get a nice visual indicator of that, which again, you can hit the flagging button. And the key thing to know in all of this is whenever an OrtaVox transceiver identifies EMI and alerts the user to it, it never stops sending a signal. Some students get concerned by that and think the beacon is broken, what's wrong? And it's good to explain to them the beacon is doing its job. It has sensed interference. This information is to alert you, and it should be alarming so that you can take proper actions. But it'll never stop sending the signal. It continues to function in both modes, even if there is electronic interference. Okay, so one of the special modes that we have is from the send screen. You will notice really there's very little on the screen other than the sending a signal. Is it allows you to go into standby mode. So standby mode is something that's good for you to know as a professional. You can use it in two ways. It was designed for you with multiple companion rescue scenario where there's multiple rescuers and you don't need every rescuer in search mode. And in fact, it's better off to optimize your resources. So what you can do in standby mode, very simply, you hit the flagging button. It'll tell you to toggle the search tab up and down, and it'll enter standby mode. It suppresses your signal first and foremost, which is your number one goal. It keeps the beacon on, keeps auto revert on, and then allows you to stow the beacon without the hazard of triggering it back into send mode. You can stow the beacon quietly and perform other parts to the rescue. You can pull out your probe, you can pull out your shovel, call 911. So it's a good function to know how to use. It can also be used on purpose if you're the instructor and you have a direct voice and your student does, and you do not want to be in search mode and cluttering their information. You want them to focus on the information from their device, but you don't want to turn your beacon off. You can go into standby mode, and that way it quiets your beacon. Student can focus on what they're doing, and you can more quickly toggle back into search to demonstrate for them again. So it's a good mode to use as an instructor as well as using in a multiple rescue scenario. The battery's gotten a lot of kudos. It was an area where people were concerned at first. It's exceeded our expectations with our professionals. It's the world's first rechargeable lithium-ion battery. It meets all of the transceiver standards that it needs to meet. Has approximately 300 hours in transmit mode, 1 hour in search, more charging cycles than you would ever need for the lifetime of the device. Main thing to know is that there will be a warning at 40% to tell the user to recharge. But what's nice about that is they don't need to replace batteries that are only a third or a quarter, power left. You can simply plug it in at the end of the day or in your car on the drive home with a USB-C cord and power it back up. And even at 30%, you could still get 100 hours of transmit time. So this was designed for a couple reasons. One is for safety. So we get away from alkaline batteries, which can fail, which can leak, which can destroy the device in the off season. It's also about simplicity. It's about sustainability, getting away from batteries. And it's actually exceeded our expectations and is one of the key features and benefits of the device is how easy it is to power up. Along with that, like most manufacturers, we have a minimum 2-year warranty, but it can be extended to 5 when you register the device. You register the device through our brand new app. It's on Android and Apple, of course, and it's Bluetooth connected. What you should know as an instructor is if you have a direct voice, you can connect with any other direct voice in the field. It doesn't need to be yours. You don't need to be registered to connect with it. And the reason you might want to do that is if you did need to recalibrate or configure any of the features for your student. So what's possible both with your device and anybody else's is through the app, you can turn the voice off if you want to, of course, change the language, change some of the modes. And then, of course, now we have our first update was released in October, the 2.1 update. It's not a safety related update, which is key for you to know. It just adds some features. One of those being better notification of EMI and search mode, better indication of the number of signals in fine search mode. So it is a good update to apply. And it is also a way when people apply it, sometimes it's their first time registering the device. So it gets people in the system and allows us to be able to communicate with them. So the update's gone super easily. A little bit about the harness. So everything was designed to be simple and easy. So you'll notice with our harness, no more zippers, no more buckles, a big Velcro tab that as you pull it actually kind of coaxes the device out of the harness. We've been asked to give what our recommendations are for carrying it. We still do say it's acceptable to carry it in a zippered pocket, like a thigh pocket, as long as it's integrated into the pant and preferably has a carabiner or a tether clip to it. Other than that, the harness now has the Reco reflector is in the harness instead of in the device, which is for some search and rescue groups, patrollers, that's key to know. So that's the end of my slides. And if there was one thing that I wanted you to know, if I have any time left, for troubleshooting, is the only thing that I've really seen is that there is a power saving mode on the screen. So when you are in send mode, the screen will power off for 8 seconds before it reactivates. And so a student might look at their device and not see anything on the screen and wonder if it's sending a signal. All you simply have to do is hit the flagging button and it'll reactivate the screen. Although with the new update, we shortened that to a 3-second interval. So no, it's not dead. No, it's not sleeping. Just touch the flagging button and you will see which antenna is transmitting and a confirmation that it's in send. What else? How am I doing, Emma?
Great. Way to pack that in.
Okay.
Was that 8 minutes?
Oh, what is it?
I have to admit that I wasn't timing it. We're gonna
Oh,
call
It was
it.
18.
I think Nikki Haley would have had an issue with the duration.
As I could have guessed that there was going to be some good banter in tonight's webinar. Thank you, Greg.
I'm
great.
gonna yield the rest of my time to Tom Mason, just because we like to keep him till the very end and just see if he wanted to scoop anything in there. Tom, anything to add?
Anything you want to add before I pass it off to our next? We'll
Greg,
also have a
you
chance
knocked
for
it
you to
out of the
answer
park, Greg. Good job. We can keep it moving. It's all good.
And we'll have a chance, folks. I just dropped this in the chat. I think participants should be able to see it. If you have questions as folks are presenting, things pop into your head and you don't want to forget it, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. I'm gonna save all questions for the end, but you can either drop it in there or at the end you'll have a chance to use that raise hand feature and then I can call on you and have you unmute to ask verbally. So okay, couple quick switch ups in our order of operations. I'm gonna have Jeremy from ARVA go next for scheduling reasons, and then I think that'll put us just, I think then we'll have a Mammut person go because it'll be right around that prime time for you. And then we'll move on and we'll have Bruce and Mike just virtually arm wrestle to see who's going to go next. So for now, Jeremy, it's all you.
Thank you. You hear me okay?
Yep.
And I might need, I'm going to share my screen. You might have the wrong person selected.
Oh. Yeah, there's 2 Jeremy Jollies.
Yeah, there's 2 of us. Can you get the other one, Emma? Is that possible? Say Jeremy Arva.
So sorry, you should both, everyone should have permissions to,
I'm trying to share now. It goes. But is there ARVA equipment listed? I have my phone going and my computers.
oh, I see. I can see if I can make this, I'm gonna make this other one a co-host and see if that changes your permissions.
I guarantee you I'll still be under 15 minutes here, so I'll be short and to the point.
See if that helped.
Tell me if you see the slideshow pop up other than you. I don't see it yet.
Not seeing anything yet.
Maybe
Is
shut
there
your
ARVA
phone
equipment?
down. You need them both?
I apologize. I have my ears on my phone. That's the thing, Mike. Well,
Oh, now we can see you from 2 angles.
this isn't going to go great. Em, I don't know if you can try to find the other, it says Jeremy-ARVA equipment member in the meantime.
Mhm.
I can,
You want me to send a panelist invitation to a different email address?
oh my gosh. Sorry.
I can also make you.
If that's what you need to do, my computer is the one that's live with this slideshow.
Okay, I made you both co-hosts, so hopefully that will make it so you can share screen. Otherwise, Jeremy, we could have I could have somebody else pop in and go next, and then we could have you share your slides with me, and I can advance through your slides.
Let's do that. Go ahead. I apologize.
Okay. All right, Mike, I'm gonna have you go next since I think we can have you share screen now, and then I'm gonna mute. Jeremy, if you want to send me your slides, I'll get those pulled up and we can have you go right after Mike.
Yeah. I'll share screen. Here we go. How's that? Everybody can see?
Yep, we gotcha.
Awesome. Okay. So first off, as you probably all know, Peeps and Black Diamond share products. So the Pro BT is also, if you can see in my screen, the Black Diamond Guide BT. And the next beacon, the Powder BT, is the Recon X. And this is most likely the beacon that your students will have. And so I'll focus most of the conversation on this beacon. For starters, 60 meter cert strip width. And like Greg said, we also don't give a signal or a direction until we have a solid signal location or a signal lock. So, and this is one of the differences in Peeps, BD, and I think the other brands is that we will wait until we get a third pulse before locking in on a signal. That way we're not getting ghost signals. It's not jumping around. So we'll wait till we get the third pulse, because that way we can confirm that it's from that same beacon and not two different beacons, which are within the correct stats there. So that's the first thing. I think this is one of the simplest beacons because it has everything you need. It's got group check, it's got flagging, it's got auto revert, and it's got several other things, but there's nothing more. And the screen is very simple. There's very few buttons, and one of the best features of this is the app, which I'll get to in a second. But one of the other things we have is circular cert strip width, and that's really, I think you all know that you get the best. I'm getting blurry screen here, but best best coupling when the beacons are pointed directly at each other, right? As soon as you do this, you reduce your range. Well, but between the software and the antennas, ours doesn't reduce significantly at all. So we have more of a circular range than most beacons do. So, but I want to get to the app because I think the app is one of the coolest things about this beacon and one of the things that makes it super unique. First off, everything, there's no toggle button on here. You don't have to toggle through to turn on the auto revert or turn it off, or iProbe support or any of the other features, or choosing which battery. All that's taken off the plate and put on the app. So it makes this super simple. I got to see if I can unfog my background. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So turning this on is super simple. Slide this over, it goes up and down. So there's 3 settings. There's off, send, and search. So super simple. The only other button on the screen on the entire beacon is the flagging button. And that's used when you turn the beacon on. For the first 3 seconds, you push that, and that gives you group check. And group check is much better to check in than send mode, because it does more than search mode, because it does more than just give you the fact that the other beacon is sending. It will check the pulse and the period to make sure that they're within the standards. So that's super important to use group check, because it's a more accurate and more complete check. So that flagging button, turn it on. That's your group check. If you want to flag somebody, you push it once. I think I've got another beacon here. So to flag, I push it once. Super simple. And now I have a little box. You probably can't see it, but there's a little stick man there with a box around him that shows he's checked. And if you want to unflag, you just hold it in, and then it'll unflag. Okay, so that's the only thing that's the only button on the screen. Nothing else you need to worry about. So for that reason, it makes this beacon really simple. So the app, again, I've taken a handful of screenshots here that show what the app shows what the app can do. And here I've got 2 beacons loaded onto my screen. And if I choose one of those, this is what comes up. So it gives you all the information about the beacon. And here you can register it. You can go down here and do a device check. You can turn on and off your group check. Your auto revert, you can turn that on and off. iProbe support, battery, you can shift from alkaline to lithium. So all those things are right here. And again, cleans up the beacon, so none of that stuff is confusing the user. So I'll just run through a couple of these. So this is the device check, and it goes through and checks everything on the everything in the beacon, gives you an okay or an error sign. And then you can hit this down here at the bottom, download certificate. And this is useful if you have a guide service where you guys are tracking this stuff. So it'll give you the beacon, the serial number, the software version, the hardware version, and it'll give you the date and time that it was checked. So this is something that's great for backing things up if you have a guide service, or if you're Avi educator group, whoever it is, tracks this stuff. Couple of the other things here. So this is just an example of the battery. So if I click the battery here down at the bottom, it'll tell you whether it's alkaline. You can choose alkaline or lithium, and tells you the number of hours that it's good for. And this is one of the coolest things, I think. And as an educator, it's going to make your job a lot easier, and it's going to make the students time searching much more valuable and efficient. So what you can do is make your own little beacon park. So I've got 2 beacons on here, and I'll check that. And on this beacon, so I chose one of the beacons, and this is the Pro, and I can turn the antenna off. I can turn the X antenna on, or I can turn the Y antenna on. So you can have 3 beacons buried, 2 or 3, and here I just have 2, and this will tell you, okay, there's 2 beacons. They show up on your screen like this. This one is indicated that the one on the left has the Y antenna on, and then the one on the right has no antenna on. And just with your finger, you can drag those wherever you want on the screen to create a map so you know where these beacons are. And then for each student, you can turn off an antenna, turn on an antenna, turn all of them off except for one. So you can bury the beacons one time and do multiple scenarios without wasting time digging them up once you get a strike. So this is one of the things that I think as a trainer and educator, you'll find super useful. And for your students too, if they've got several people that have BD or PEEPS beacons, they can create their own beacon park. It's not complicated to do at all. In fact, there's several scenarios that will show you that. Again, this is just a screenshot of the app. And this is just one of the scenarios that they lay out that will help with training. So even if you're not well versed in this as a student, you can create your own beacon park, and honestly, it makes the training a lot more fun. So the last thing I want to mention is we have for interference, when your beacon is in send mode. In send mode, let's back up. In search mode, your beacon switches back between the X and Y antennas, and it switches back and forth so that you can get a distance reading and a directional arrow as well. But when it's in send, it only sends from the strongest antenna. And if that antenna is interfered with, then with most beacons, you won't know that. But what we've done is, and I know you all do this when you start your day educating, show that beacon in the harness and put your hand on your phone, which is probably in the pant pocket of the on the opposite side. But we all know the phones come out during the tour or education, and maybe it gets put back in the jacket pocket. Now it's right on top of the other beacon. So I don't think I can show it with this, but what this does, this is the screen here, and then this is showing you which antenna is transmitting. And if you put, and you can do this yourself, you can put a cell phone up against this, and eventually it will shift over to the other antenna. So it goes from this antenna to this one with interference. Now, if I come back here, it switches back to the X antenna. So that's one of the things with interference. It will always send from the strongest antenna available. So, and I think that wraps it up. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, holler. Otherwise, I will relinquish the rest of my time to Mr. Jolly.
Thanks, Mike. And actually, I'm going to make one more pivot because Jake and Doug, I'm sympathetic to kid dinner time. So I want to make sure you get a chance to go. So thank you for just bearing with me, everyone, as I tell you what order I'm going to go in, and then I just randomly mix it up every single time. So I'm going to let the Mammut folks go.
Are the panelists?
Say again, Bruce?
Are the panelists allowed to ask questions?
Let's have you, just so I can get team dad duty off the line. We can deal with that. But yes, absolutely. You know, I assumed that you would be asking questions of one another at some point in this panel. So yes, definitely, Bruce. But for now,
I'll ask in the chat.
Okay, yeah, perfect. For now, I'm going to let Team Mammut give their presentation. And then actually, Mike, I think I just need to have you stop screen sharing unless I can do that for you. Okay, perfect. And then, okay, Team Mammut, sorry, Jeremy, I'm going to bump you one more. And then Bruce, thank you for being a good sport and going last. Great. I swear this is, okay, a mostly good sport. Okay.
All right. Thanks,
there we go.
everybody.
Okay.
I feel like I'm on a game show. I think Jake's got a form. Jake, if you could pull up that and share that comparison document, I'm going to use that template. And I'm gonna try to keep this short, but I am trying to talk about two different beacons so that everybody knows the difference between the BerryVox and the BerryVox S. The BerryVox, I can't see it, but Jake, are you sharing?
Coming, Doug, coming.
The BerryVox is our most basic, more price point beacon, maybe what you're more likely to see in courses. But all of our beacons have a 70-meter range and therefore a 70-meter recommended search strip width, and obviously all have 3 antennas. In terms of batteries, the BerryVox runs only on alkaline batteries. The BerryVox S does have the option of running with lithium batteries to the point that others have made that avoids the risk of alkaline battery corrosion, which is one of the #1 customer concerns that we see when folks open up their beacons for the new year, realize they've forgotten to take their batteries out and have corrosion issues. And while corrosion is not always an issue, if it has occurred, it can create significant damage to the beacons. So the beacons right out of the gate, when you turn them on, they're going to give you the option for the group check. I believe that most beacons nowadays that have the group check function or have a marking function have a group check function. I'm not 100% certain on that, but all of our beacons do have a group check function, and that group check function tells you more than if a beacon is just sending at 457, which is also addressed in the startup self-check. That startup self-check also confirms that you're sending and receiving at 457. But a typical trailhead check just going into search only is telling you that there is the presence of a 457 signal. But a lot of people will take the beacon and just put it very close to another sending beacon. The problem with that being that that sending beacon could be outside of the norms. It could be sending, it could have drift of more than 80 megahertz, and you could still get a positive signal. So you could get a false positive if you're just using your beacon in search mode for your group check. And the other problem with that is that if you did forget to switch back, then your switch is in search mode and you're out on an outing. So by using the group check the way we use it, when you turn your beacon on, across the bottom of the screen, it'll say group check, and you just press the big select button or marking button, the big orange button on the front of the screen, which is the only button on the front of the screen. And now you're in essentially a search mode where your range has been reduced to 1 meter, and you can do your group check. And if you do forget to switch back, the beacon will do it for you after a couple minutes. So the group check definitely adds a lot of safety in that manner. All of the beacons can pick up to 16 signals, which hopefully nobody's ever going to be doing. But and build your list of buried subjects with a visual cue on the side of how many victims you have. With the BerryVox S, you have the added benefit that those little avatars that in your list of buried subjects will either be filled in black, which means, like Hatrip Mike was saying, you know, you've gotten not just a beep, but you've gotten multiple beeps to indicate that you've got a solid read on a victim. If the avatar is in with the BerryVox S is only a silhouette, then that means it has heard 457. But in the case that you have either a beacon with significant signal drift or another piece of electronics that might have similar harmonics to 457, that's a clue that that could be a ghost signal. Let's see here. So obviously all of these beacons have marking. The BerryVox S also has the ability to scroll through the different victims. So in the event that you wanted to start to build a mental map and see the approximate distances of the different victims, you would have the benefit of doing so. Again, that's only on the BerryVox S. All of the beacons have a rescue send function, or sorry, just the BerryVox S has a rescue send function. So we recommend that all people that are on site at an avalanche are not turning their beacons off and not turning their beacons to send or search, rather, if they are not an active participant in the beacon search. But we want them to have protection from additional avalanche hazard. So by putting your beacon in rescue send, your beacon is, again, the switch is still in send mode, but you are no longer actually sending a signal. In the event that you were captured in another avalanche or involved in another avalanche and stopped moving, the motion sensor in the BerryVox S would identify that and start sending your signal again. So that's kind of something across the board. For professional rescuers, we're recommending people use rescue send instead of turning it off or to search if they're not searching. The Pro Search function is something that's only available with the BerryVox S. That unlocks your ability to scroll. That unlocks your ability to not only, you already had the ability to mark, but now you could unmark, which for most people is not advantageous. It's usually a sign that they're confused. But for the professional rescuer, that is advantageous. And when you're in Pro mode, you also now have access to analog sound, which is advantageous in the case of extreme instances of EMI or overlap, and gives you access to solve with alternative search strategies such as a micro search strip that are far easier with devices that are not solely digital only marking beacons. So going back to the BerryVox itself is the simplest device we make. When you go into search mode with the BerryVox, you are going to have very simple indicators in terms of how you should do that search. It's going to remind you that you have a 70-meter search strip width. And since signal search is the time at which you are most likely to experience EMI, since essentially your volume is turned up to the highest, that's when you're going to see your EMI warnings. If it does hear white noise, it's going to advise you to use a 20-meter search strip width. And with the BerryVox S also has an additional warning of which looks like a cell phone with a line through it. In coarse search with the BerryVox, you've got about a 340-degree arrow. And when that arrow is centered, you have what we call tonal directional arrows, where the sound is going to be at a higher pitch and frequency when it is properly aligned to the front of the screen. When you arrive in your fine search mode, we really have noticed that regardless of skill set, from the recreational user to the professional user, a lot of mistakes are made during fine search. So we address that in two different ways. With the BerryVox, again, the simpler beacon, we want people to address that not through technology, but through behavior and technique. So the icon on the screen during fine search with the BerryVox is simply a single axis line with an arrowhead on either direction. The theory there being that for most people, especially if they do a good job in coarse search, keeping the arrow really well aligned with the help of the tonal directional arrows, that they should be very close to the victim by the time they are having to do any fine search technique. So we're advising most recreational users that just finding the lowest number on that first axis line is most often, especially in the case of shallow burials, which is most of the time, if there even is a burial, that just finding that single point on that fixed axis line is more than enough to begin probing. And we very much believe that since most of us over the course of our careers practice beacon scenarios with unrealistically small targets, that we have started to train all of us to over search in fine search. We don't really believe there's any need to discern between 1.2 and 1.0, especially for the recreational user. That person should at that point begin probing. So we very much are trying to build our platforms to get people probing as soon as possible, since nobody should be digging before they probe, and you haven't found a victim until you've gotten a probe strike. So that very simple prompt to try to encourage people to find just the lowest number on that fixed axis and begin probing, we believe helps people be faster. Of course, that does not preclude the rescuer's ability to do a left and a right. But again, we really believe that if people are doing a lot of grid searching, that something else has gone wrong. So that's the way we address that topic with the Berry Box. With the Berry Box S, we address that topic with additional technology, and we use what we refer to as assisted find search. So we all know that the general tenets of find search involve keeping the beacon in a fixed axis and a fixed orientation and at a similar elevation over the snow. That is easier said than done. We also know that if they are grid searching, those search lines should be at a 90-degree axis, basic tenets of find search. But again, those are things that if you watch even professional users doing, it's, once you introduce difficult debris, blocks of snow, broken trees, you're on slope, that is not actually as easy as one might think. So the assisted find search actually tells you, it gives you a prompt that's very similar to all of us because it's basically taken right from like a GPS style platform where you have an arrow in a circle on a road. And if that arrow is not in alignment, it prompts you to correct. If it wants you to go forward, back, left, or right, it tells you to do so. And the best part of this assisted find search is that a significant amount of the time, you will never even see the prompts to do left, center, front, back, because it instantly gives you the prompt to probe that you're done. So in a lot of instances, again, especially in instances where you do a really good job below 10 meters, the last part of your course search, then because of this technology, you've essentially skipped an entire segment of the search phases and can get straight to probing. So again, just like with the Berry Box using technique, this is a kind of a technology-based effort to achieve the same thing, which is get people probing faster and reduce a lot of the confusion that occurs during find search. The Berry Box S also has a lot of capabilities in terms of customizing the unit, which is advantageous for the professional rescuer. The Berry Box is a fixed platform like many beacons where out of the box it's used how it's used. Let me just see my cheat sheet to see if I missed anything. Both beacons have the interference guard, the warnings during find search. We talked about assisted find search, pro mode, scroll, and EMI. The Berry Box S also has the addition of a deep burial mode by triangulating essentially with 3 different antennas. In normal instances, your beacon is going into find search mode right around 3 meters. But if the beacon has identified on approach that it is likely a deep burial, your beacon will actually go into find search mode up to 6 meters. The final thing I want to talk about that I think is very helpful for everybody if they take advantage of it is we have the ability through a diagnostic testing unit to test something like 27 different functions of the beacon. And we advise that all users are sending this beacon in for this testing a minimum of every 3 years. I advise more active users, professional users, that if they have the ability to do so, every summer they're sending the beacon in to us to do the diagnostic testing, or a lot of these testing units are available around the country to make it easier. This really addresses the issue of when to retire your beacon. We do not give advice on when to retire a beacon. We do not believe that beacons need to be arbitrarily retired at 3 to 5 years if they are using current firmware, which we update somewhat frequently. Almost every one of our updates has always been a performance update as opposed to a patch. And if you're doing regular firmware updates and you're testing your beacons, then there's really no reason to retire your beacon. I still have Pulse Berry Box beacons that were manufactured in 2006 that have good firmware on them that has been developed and updated frequently. They test out well, they test in the field well, and there's no reason that I wouldn't give that beacon to my wife or my child. So this is really a sustainability story. This is you know, an affordability story. Even though the beacon, you know, might cost X or Y up front, it really allows you to use that beacon with confidence much longer than you normally would. And that's all I've got. Jake, do you want to chime in with anything?
That was excellent, Doug. I'm going to add a couple points as I've been thinking with this webinar about, as a practitioner, what are the things I wish I had known? And so I've come up with 6 points. Number one, for all beacon manufacturers, use the group check function. I feel like that's a newer function and it's not incorporated yet into everyday education. 2 is discuss the varying search strip widths. And I realized that I think the most recent ARRI Blue Book I have says 30 meters, which obviously would be a safe bet across all the manufacturers here, but every manufacturer does have a different search width. So discuss that with your students. 3 is our auto revert function is auto, exactly as it says. You don't need to turn it on. And it's 4 minutes, as Doug said, after detecting no movement. I think I'm at 4 now. We recommend knee height in the fine search, as opposed to I myself, and I've seen a lot of instructors teach beacon as close to the snow as possible. So we recommend at knee height for fine search. As Doug just said, a push for testing, especially during the summer months. Our customer service team likes to get those in the summer and not in October, right before it snows. And finally, Doug hit this, but the Berry Box does have a mark function, but it does not have an unmarked function. So the Berry Box S has a mark and an unmarked function. The final thing I'm going to leave with is I have an additional resources list, which I'll just drop into the chat for folks.
Since I think we went pretty quickly, I just want to expound on a couple things that Jake said that I might have failed to mention. An additional benefit of using the group check mode is that when you use the group check mode at the prescribed distance of 1 meter, the range of your beacon has been turned down so that it only hears anything within 1 meter. Not only does that guarantee that you're actually checking the person close to you, it also allows you to essentially do a range check every time you're doing a group check. If I'm in group check mode and I'm testing Jake and I'm at the prescribed distance of 1 meter, I not only know that his beacon is setting at 457, I know that it's an accurate signal, and I also know that it's a powerful signal. So I now trust the recommended search strip width of his beacon, regardless of the brand. If he's using a beacon with a different search strip width, as long as I know that search strip width, I should be able to be confident in that. And, you know, additionally, the one thing about the knee is that is an additional tool that we use in teaching, because we do believe that people have trained, you know, in guide exams, you're searching for a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter target. In Canada, I think in the US, the AMGA's changed that to 40 centimeters, but it's still an unrealistically sized target that really, you know, forces people to over search. And we want people moving a little bit faster than we believe most people do. And we think that is much easier at a knee height as opposed to crawling around in the snow. And we think that allows them to move faster and smoother and more strategically. And then one person asked a question, Jeremy, you asked, is there a chance for consumer diagnostic testing when mailed in? Yes, anytime you give us one of your beacons, we can test it if you ask us to.
This QR code on screen is the additional resources page, which has the specifications page we're just looking at, links to videos, has the email address, phone number, and mailing address for our customer service center in North America. So this would be for non-present future YouTube users. And for live users, I'll drop the link in the chat.
Real quick, Jake, I'm getting you need permission to view this. So you might need to update so anyone with a link can view.
Okay, I will do that.
That's the story of my life. So I get it.
For the future people, I'll do that right now.
While Jake's doing that, before I let you guys sign off, I got a question from an audience member about why Mammut recommends knee height instead of as close as possible to no surface.
I think I kind of covered that, but again, this comes back to the fact that we think that people have been trained to look for unusually sized targets. If you know, to use hyperbole, if you were looking for something the size of a buried F-150, my guess is that you would very quickly see all users, as soon as they saw even a remotely low number, start probing. I, for one, if I was buried under the snow, which unfortunately I have been, would be hoping that people would be probing much sooner than they typically are. So bringing that into a realistic size target, if you have a target that's 2 meters long, we believe we really want to get people probing faster. We think that by going to knee height, the only thing you've given up is maybe 15 centimeters, and that does not really affect your speed or your accuracy. But it is really challenging to move on snow by crawling around on it, which is what we see a lot of people doing. It's also very difficult when you're crawling around on snow to maintain that fixed axis that all manufacturers are recommending. So and again, we think that because people have been searching for these small targets and spending so much time trying to tell the difference between 1.1 and 0.9, which does not matter at all, you know, once you go to realistic targets, then you start to see that you can move a little faster. And we want people moving, obviously, as fast as possible. Of course, we're still advising that you're slowing down in comparison to course search and signal search. But we think that when we view both professional users and recreational users doing searches, they're moving far too slow. So by moving to a knee, you're allowed to hold, it makes it much easier to hold your beacon in a better axis. It allows you to move a little faster at a more consistent speed than you can ever achieve when you're crawling. And we think that leads to a much faster find search.
Thanks, Doug. That's a great answer. I think one more before I let you guys go attend to life stuff. Dan's asking, is there a list of regional locations with the diagnostic testing for the BerryVox beacons?
There is a list online. We'll drop that. It's constantly changing because we constantly have more and more people adopting them. But I would say by default, you know, the easiest thing to do is when you're putting your gear away at the end of the season, think about just sending it to us, because it takes, you know, then if it takes a week or 10 days to turn around, it's not that big of a deal. But we do have locations in Utah and Colorado, Wyoming, California. You know, it might save you a day or two, but you can always send it to Vermont.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan, for that question. And thanks, Doug. Doug and Jake, thank you so much. That's awesome. We appreciate you being here. I know it's like, this is like prime dinner hour for everybody. So really appreciate it.
Well, sorry I have to go. Thanks everybody from the manufacturers for sharing this stuff. It's very helpful for me to learn about your beacons as well, as much as it is, I'm sure, for all of these students.
And folks, if you have more questions for Mammut after these guys sign off, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat too, and I'll make sure that those get to Jake and Doug so they can answer them for you. And I'll include those answers in the follow-up email. Thank you, Team Mammut.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, great. Jake's going to stick around. Awesome. Thanks, Jake. All right, Jeremy, let me pull up your slides and we'll be ready to go.
Super, thanks.
All right, let me see if I can. This really wants to put it on both of my screens, which is, that's not
Okay.
good.
Oh yeah. I could try to share mine again too if we get it dialed. I hung up.
Feel free to try it, and then if that doesn't work,
Rather
I'll figure it out.
It died, but I'm trying to. There we go now. But please grant browser access. It says. So. Okay. Why don't you try, Emma?
Okay. Let's try. All right, let's see what we can do here.
So I'll try to do my best to keep it moving. I realize it's dragging out, and I will be trying to be as product centric as possible. I know it goes in the deep dive when you start talking techniques along with beacons. And so Emma, once you hit next, we'll just cruise through a few of these initial ones pretty fast. I did want to give just a quick overview because, as I mentioned, go ahead to the next one. with the history of our company. The end goal here, again, I'll try to move quick also to leave some time for the instructors at the end, because I do want to have that two-way conversation. But the end goal is to make ourselves also more accessible. So, I'm probably every one of the presenters up here gets feedback from students, and they said, oh yeah, and my instructor said to call them or something because I wasn't sure. And so, that's the last thing we want as well. But at the same time, we want to be open to everybody. So our email there, service@arvaequipment.com. We can initiate a conversation there if something can't be found online. Go ahead to the next one. And as far as the company, I did mention, we were started with transceivers. Nicole Giordano, who is a French ski racer, her son now runs the company, but she started in the 80s there when, the original focus was on consumer beacons and how to make them a little simpler than the traditional search-specific ones in the past. Arva, again, is a company where we're narrow focused. We've launched several models in those years in business. Go to the next slide. Some of these models you may recognize, and you get some of these oldies in your thing, but we've got a couple different accolades where, we've tried things like the third antenna as a full strength with that Axio, the middle one down at the bottom in 2016. It was the first antenna of its kind to have a spherical search where the third antenna was full strength, full size. A lot of times, and if you go ahead to the next slide, just like now, I've got lithium batteries in my AirPods and I'm worried about them going dead. Transceiver companies were guilty. I'll try to just simplify this, but we were putting so much into our transceivers, and from GPS to second frequencies. And what you guys have now, and the whole purpose, I think, of your education base is to really give people a simple tool to run. And so it's A to B, and then the work starts to probing and shoveling as well. So we have 3 different models in the line currently. They're very targeted to users. So this first one here is the Evo 4. This is our base model, initial price point, that $299 with real marking and basically the simple features is kind of that initial price in the market, as well as for us here. I like to say count 5, you can use this, only does 5 things. The on-off is 2 of them. And just to illustrate this, and I know there's going to be maybe a question out there, this comes with what we call the click for safe system, where this is similar to some old beacons of the past where you have to throw it over your shoulder, connect it in order for it to be turned on. So that's a user benefit, again, targeted to this customer, where the beacon, they wouldn't forget to turn it on or turn it off at the end of the day. Now, if people do want a little more search range, and we give these for different purposes and demos and different things, we do make a professional harness, that picture in the bottom, where you can buy the harness aftermarket, $39, and you have now more of a traditional style that can come out, have a little more range and pinpoint, because the way with clip for safe, you can't quite get it that far away from the body as you would when you're pinpointing. You might get it to your knees, but it's gonna be more mid-thigh, if you know what I mean. This beacon too, just as a standard, again, of course, everything sells 3 antennas, everything has multi-victim marking, and everything has group check. So again, the simple 5 on this is on, off, transmit, search, mark, and then that group check. And so this is when you go ahead and plug the beacon on. Initially, you hold the flag button down, and it's going to flash into a CH and go into that check mode where it's only viewing a small distance. I'll elaborate a little more on that on the next one, but this is a basic, only confined to a small space. Go to the next slide, the next beacon. So we have Evo 5 we introduced about 4 seasons ago. This has that trend, and I'll go back to this with pocket-sized type beacons. This one we actually sell. We surveyed in different testing where most people will use this in their pocket. So the harness, as this one is sold as an accessory, we could just give them away free too, because there's a lot of security in the harness and where it's stored. We come back to that. But this beacon, I like to describe it, kind of has the modern features of a beacon. If there's one thing, if I could sit in classes or if we were physically with instructors, this seems simple and rudimentary, but I think everyone here understands the importance of knowing both your beacon and your partner's beacon, whether you're turning them off or different scenarios. But this beacon turning on, simply squeezing the top and bottom, it will snap into that send mode and lock, just like most beacons into that search or send mode. Again, that's the fail-safe mode of be transmitting, be safe. The one unique thing on this I like to point out is in turning that on and off. So to go off, you need to both do a physical lock on the slider and go upward. And that's not the only thing. It's a two-step procedure to turn it off. Just like a cell phone, a lot of things, you have to do the hardware switch of the slider. It's going to ask you and give an audible tone, are you sure you want to turn off, with the little flagging thing flashing? And you have to press the flag in order to confirm you want to turn off. Again, all switches, all of our beacons are subject to so much mechanical forces in the event of an avalanche. So this, even if it was mechanically forced and the slider comes off for all intents and purposes, you do not confirm it's going to go back into that safe, back into that transmit mode. So that's simply just turning this on and off. Again, back to the topic of modern features, it's got multi-victim marking. There's clear indicators at the bottom. It's going to show you 1, 2, 3, and a plus if there's 4 or more, and it will feed those in as you marked number 3 or number 4. This beacon also has a U-turn alert. So we do not have a 360 like has been described in some different beacons so far, or even a 270, whatever you have. But if you are going the wrong direction, both with this beacon and the next one up, for a count of 5 different pulses, it will give you a U-turn alert, which is actually pretty beneficial to students. And again, speaking to those different user groups, like we did with the voice and stuff, it's a clear indicator that U-turn. The auto reaver on this one, again, you do the 2 steps to go into search mode with the lock and the slider, and to just slide that, it will start a timer immediately at that point, and the auto revert is on an 8-minute timer with this beacon, and it is not adjustable. Again, it's just going back to safe mode and this user. The last feature, aside from the search strip width that we advertise as 50 meters, is the interference management. So we have the interference indicator. We see, and what's interesting to us, as well as the BearVox just presented, we've been doing this since 2018 in search mode. It's now getting a little more chatter and talk. But when you go into that search mode, if there is a relevant degree of interference that's going to impede the search, it will give you a notification. And so you can tell, hey, there's some interference present. Maybe I can do something about it. Maybe you can't. Again, heated gloves, watches, bone snowmobiles, you guys all know the worst culprits there. But it also gives you 2 things. It's an indicator to maybe shorten up your search technique, but also it adjusts, and this is, from my understanding, a similar function to what the BearVox did, and it will reduce the range internally as well. So it's focusing on a smaller area, and it will be able to lock on one or multiple signals better and cut out some of that background noise that we've seen before. And the last beacon, if you want to toggle next, Emma, we have is the Neo BT Pro. So we launched this last year. It's been doing very well. Haven't had issues. And the capabilities on this one, it's a $429 price point, so it's not the most expensive beacon out there, but it is what I like to see is feature rich. It has about everything you'd need, plus a few things from an analog mode, an actual analog, which to me it would be awesome as an instructor because you can flip over that and roll over your watch. I've seen Edge do that with the OrtaVox, an old one, but you can do that with a new beacon that you might use as well, and visually immediately show what electronic sounds like EMI. It's got, I'll just say, customizable features, everything you'd want. The motion sensor, you can adjust the timer. It's got that same interference management. And the group check in both the Neo and the Evo 5 is similar to what Doug just described, where it's checking the frequency as well as that reduced range that you would come into. And yeah, I will emphasize, again, it's really good to do that at 1 meter. I always kind of bugs me when people butt their beacons up against each other because, if you listen to a very loud signal, and to check that signal for accuracy, it's best to be right around that 1 meter point. This beacon also has standby mode, a lot of stuff. We've launched our app just
Did Jeremy just freeze up for other folks too? Okay, I can still see Mike and Bruce moving around, so I think it might be on Jeremy's end.
Yeah, he froze up on my screen.
Okay. I'm gonna give him like 30 seconds. Jeremy, if you can hear us, I'm holding your slides.
I think it was Emma just noting that he's over his time limit, so she shut him off.
I'd like to think I would be like a little more subtle, but all right, just since we're running a little bit behind here, if Jeremy's got more and all of this information, instructors, I'm going to share out with you. I'll put everything in a folder. Jake already was kind enough to compile all of those Mammut resources, and so I'm gonna put everything in one place for you all, including the cheat sheet that I'm going to create for this. So this isn't our last chance to hear from Jeremy. I know ARVA beacons in particular are ones that folks have expressed to me that they'd like to learn more about because they've just encountered them less. So glad to have that, but I'm going to keep moving things along because we have pretty limited time here. So let me figure out how to stop sharing. There we go. Let's see. Bruce, thank you for your patience. I'm going to have you start presenting. Hopefully Jeremy can join us again, but if not, we'll wrap up with Bruce and then we'll do a little round robin style before we get to instructor questions. Ed, you're muted.
Okay, unmuted. All right. Okay, you got me?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay. All right, so yeah, Bruce Edgerly here. Yeah, just want to talk about our company first. Yeah, we started back in 1994, and we've always been very focused on the recreational user. We were the company that made beacons easy to use. A year before ARVA. In 1997, we came out with the world's first digital avalanche transceiver and world's first multiple antenna avalanche transceiver, which made it a lot easier for people to search because they didn't have to do grid and bracket searching, and the microprocessor did most of the work. But you still need to practice. And yeah, you'll see that, you know, our slogan for the last couple of years has been simplicity is fast, practice is faster, which kind of sums up our whole company philosophy, is that simplicity is speed when you're under a stressful situation, but education and practice are equally, if not more important. So just a couple things about BCA. Like I said, first digital avalanche transceiver, which really made searching more accessible to just typical backcountry skiers. We also, I guess you could say, made the first affordable, easy to use airbag, and we kind of popularized airbags in this country. And we popularized radios by making those easier to use and more reliable for winter backcountry recreationalists. Especially channel 420, very popular. And I guess you could say we were kind of early in on educating our customers, not just selling products, but also providing education. And this is something that I know ARRI technical director Steve Conger advised that we do early on, and we took his advice, and we've been focused on education ever since. That's kind of my job at BCA. I'm the education czar here. And we'll talk about some of the resources we offer later. And then we also were the first manufacturer to really accommodate snowmobiling. You know, we're a little bit different than a lot of the other transceiver companies because we're North American and all the others are European. So sometimes you'll see we can be a little bit of an outlier in several, many different ways. You know, we're the only company really that uses LEDs. There's a lot of things that we kind of ignore that come out of Europe that we think are too conservative. So, you know, we have a slightly different culture over here, I would say, than Europe. It's a little bit more, I would say, maybe more recreationist oriented. So that's what we focus on, is the recreational masses. And the recreational masses need education. So we try to get that out there just as much as our marketing. All right, so I'm going to talk about Tracker 4 today because that's kind of our premier product. And T2 plus T3, believe it or not, equals T4. So the genesis of the Tracker 4 was kind of the marriage of Tracker 2 and Tracker 3. So Tracker 2 was very popular transceiver, especially with pro and guiding and patrol outfits because it was super rugged. They just loved the industrial design, the rubber overmolding, and the really bright, loud display. Because a lot of them are hard of hearing after chucking bombs for so long. And they're old like me, so they have a hard time seeing the numbers. So you'll see that the Tracker 4 has a lot of the industrial design of the old Tracker 2. It's really loud, bright. It's got that ruggedized case, and but it has the sophisticated electronics of our Tracker 3, which includes things like signal suppression, big picture mode, motion sensing, auto revert, and upgradable software. So what are some of the things about Tracker 4 that we want you to take home? I would say the most important is just what we call our real-time display, which really is a key point, because we found that, and I'm sure all you guys have found when teaching courses, that the fine search is where people really burn a lot of time. And sometimes they're just moving too fast and they're dragging the numbers around with them. So if you have more of an instantaneous display, it makes it easier to bracket. You don't have to wait for the numbers to update as you're bracketing. The real-time display also has big benefits in multiple burials and in trailhead checks. So you might have noticed that when you do a trailhead check and you're going around the circle, just sticking your transceiver up to your buddies from one to the next, we don't drag anybody's signal away as we move over to the next person. When you get, give or take, halfway over to the next person, it drops the signal that you had and picks up the one next door. So we call that real-time signal locking and unlocking. And as a result, we don't actually have a group check function because we don't really need it for that purpose. You stick it up to somebody's chest, you get their signal, you move it over a meter or two, you lose their signal, and you get the next guy's signal. It's super clean and crisp. And then, you know, in multiple burial situations, generally speaking, you're going to want to have last seen points. And most of the time you will have last seen points. So there's no reason to press buttons in a multiple burial if you don't have to. You know, as soon as you start marking, you're taking a risk. The risk is that A, you're going to lose some receive range, and you might not see the next victim if they're just on the fringe of detection. But also, once you start using marking, there's a possibility that it might not work, and that you might lose the mark, or you might not be able to mark. And that's because there's a possibility and a higher probability with more and more victims within range that you're going to have overlapping signals. So if you just don't bother pressing buttons and you have last seen points, then you can just run to one last seen point go down the fall line, get that person an airway, and then run over to the next last seen point and do that find search, and you haven't pressed any buttons. It's just going to unlock from the one you're running away from and lock onto the one that you're getting closer to. So just an intuitive way to search that's that we call no nonsense multiple variable searching, that I think generally is the way in the real world how multiple variable searching tends to be done. And this is how sometimes, we do these beacon Olympics, and it's always the guys that don't press buttons that win these things. Yeah, it's just, and the other thing is that it's a very, so we have optimized, I guess you could say we have optimized the real-time display, not only for fine searching, but also for what we call terrain elimination. So terrain elimination is when you systematically search the debris based on signal strength, not pushing buttons. And this is how, like you'll see in guiding exams, how most of the really successful guide aspirants are passing their exams, is not pressing buttons and marking, but by doing micro search strips based on signal strength. And the tracker family, not just the tracker 4, but all the trackers with their real-time signal locking and unlocking are really, really good at micro search stripping that way. All right, so let's move on to real-time locking, a close proximity indicator. That's kind of something unique to the tracker. It's really just close proximity multiple burials where you might want to press buttons. Generally speaking, if you have last seen points, you don't need to press buttons. But also, if you're just doing a signal search according to your search strip width, you're gonna find everybody by doing switchbacks sooner or later. So it's only if the victims are close to each other that you may not pick up another signal during your signal search, because there's a stronger one kind of in front of one just on the other side of that person. So if you have a close proximity situation with our close proximity indicator, then okay, I need to do something special here. I need to either use big picture, which is our version of mental mapping, or signal suppression once you probe the first person. And we'll go over that in a minute. So that's what those brackets are. You'll see over on the right-hand photo, that's a tracker S. And the brackets that you see around those two bodies, that means those two victims are within 6 meters of each other. And that's a big red flag that you need to not rush through this, and you're probably going to want to consider pressing buttons. Okay, so what's signal suppression? Well, signal suppression is our version of marking. And it's different than marking because A, we only do it for 1 minute, and B, we only suppress one signal. So why do we do that? Well, A, there are trade-offs. One way we were able to achieve our real-time display and real-time locking and unlocking is because we only study and crunch all the numbers on the two closest signals. And that enables us to process less information and to maintain our real-time display. The trade-off is, well, we can only mark one victim. But I'm not quite sure if in the real world anybody has ever marked more than one victim. Does anybody know of a situation where more than one person was actually marked? I'd love to read about that. So Send me a link if you know of such a case. And then, yeah, we suppress for 1 minute because you really should be able to get from one victim to the next, halfway from one victim to the next victim within a minute. And if you haven't, something's probably gone wrong. Most likely a signal overlap, in which case we often, with any transceiver brand, once people's marking or suppression feature fails, they will often throw their hands up in the air. And sometimes by the time they figured out what's going on, they're way below the scenario, and it's really difficult to start over. So we start over for them. After a minute in signal suppression, we basically reboot the system and put you back in normal search mode. And that will at least pull you back into the scenario to the closest victim to where you are. We've seen too many times where people will mark a signal and then they don't end up at the victim. And then they're down below the scenario and they've scrubbed a bunch of time. And we hear about this all the time, especially from the AMGA guiding exams. So that's what this 1 minute auto reboot is that I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean, none of us are immune to the problems of signal overlap when we're marking. So we're just doing for you what you probably need to do anyways, which is reboot. Okay, so basically we have optimized our trackers for 1 to 2 burials, which is 95% of the scenarios out there. However, for the complicated scenarios of 3 and more victims, generally speaking, a lot of professionals are advising that you be familiar with alternate search strategies that rely on signal strength rather than marking, because the more victims there are, the less reliable marking and suppression are. So this is where you'll see micro search stripping comes in pro level courses and in AVSAR courses. And our real-time locking and unlocking is extremely effective in this kind of searching, when you are zigzagging through the terrain and eliminating terrain as you go and picking up the strongest signal in a very systematic micro search strip pattern. I was just on the phone today with Christian Santelises, one of the AMGA guide examiners, and he was telling me about the Valdez course last year where half of the students failed their beacon exam. That's a lot of money to invest in a course and then fail the beacon exam. And all of them who failed had transceivers with marking functions, and that's what they were doing. And that's, he said the issue is sometimes they had overlaps and they were losing their marks. And if you haven't done a systematic grid pattern where you eliminating terrain as you go, and you know which areas you've searched and you haven't searched, then it gets very, very confusing. So this is the kind of searching where the trackers really work well because of our real-time locking and unlocking. If anybody wants really to get into the weeds on it, I suggest looking at our video called How to Pass a Guiding Exam on our website, on our YouTube page. Okay. And then our auto revert system is redundant, at least on the tracker 4. So we have a motion sensing system, and after 30 seconds, you'll get an alarm. And if you press the options button, that yellow one there, or turn the system on and off, but I would just press the options button, then it will stay in search mode. if you have auto revert turned on. And but we also have a 5-minute hard return timer. So that way, let's say you're in search mode, you've got auto revert activated, and you get buried in search mode, which you don't want. But let's say you've got a bit of an air pocket, or you've got a little wiggle room, and you're fighting to build an air pocket. Well, that could trigger the motion sensor, in which case you're not going to revert back to transmit. Well, after 5 minutes, we still have a hard return, so that if you're doing that, struggling and triggering the motion sensor, you're still going to go back to transmit mode. I'm pretty sure we're the only manufacturer that has this redundancy. Now, we do require that you activate auto revert at startup. And that's because we've found that rogue signals are a much more prevalent challenge than either secondary avalanches, which is what auto revert is for, and also even than multiple burials. Like I can guarantee you that 100% of you avalanche instructors have encountered rogue signals when you're doing exercises where somebody's in transmit mode when they should be in search mode. So what we're trying to do is minimize that from happening. If you have to activate your auto revert when you turn on your transceiver, then when that alarm goes off, when it wants to go back to transmit, you know what's going on, and you will prevent it from going back to transmit. But if you don't know what's going on because you're not familiar with the function and you haven't read your manual, then you're going to become a rogue signal, which is very, very distracting, not just in avalanche courses, but in real avalanche rescues. So that's why we do that. So over here on the right is our tracker S, which is our well, tracker S is more of our value-based beacon, and that's tracker 4 minus motion sensing, minus software upgrades, and minus the ruggedized industrial design. So the S means simplicity. That's our stripped down simple unit, which costs like $299. All right, so let's see. This is just some. We were advised not to play videos, so I just took some screenshots from our video. You'll see on our YouTube and our website we have a bunch of videos, and one of them I took these from the video about signal suppression. Basically, to make signal suppression work, you press the yellow options button with your thumb. You just press it hard and release, and then you'll see this first photo is of somebody pressing that button when they're 1 meter away after the victim has been probed and there's people digging. Of course, in most situations, you're going to want to start digging and get that person an airway before you even think about moving on. But let's just say you have plenty of people that can start excavating while you go look for the next victim. If you don't have a last seen point, then you might hit signal suppression, and that will suppress the found victim signal and bring you to the next closest victim. So you'll see on the left photo here, we've got the first victim pinpointed. He or she is a meter down. And you'll also see that there's 2 bodies with brackets around them. That means we have a close proximity situation. So now it's heads up. You're probably going to want to press that options button either to suppress this signal or to go into big picture to see exactly where the next one is, rather than just continuing on with your signal search until you pick up the next one. So that's what that icon means. And the plus sign means there's actually more than 2. Now, we don't bother counting more than 2, because once you get 3 or more, then you'll see with all these transceivers out there that it'll fluctuate. The bodies will come and go as there are signal overlaps. And the more there are, the less reliable that counting function is. So we don't mislead. We don't want to mislead anybody. We just tell you, okay, you got 2 or you have more than 2.
Edge, I'm going to jump in because we have 5 minutes left in our session.
Okay. 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 The next photo, yeah, we've pressed the button and it says SS for signal suppression, and then the next signal comes up, and this victim is 7.6 meters away to the left. So I would just follow that, and you'll end up find searching that one. And then to go back to regular search mode, you just press that options button again, and you're back in regular search mode, and it's going to just show you the closest signal rather than the next closest signal, like signal suppression does. Let's see here. I'm going to move on to the next. Okay, and then this is big picture. What big picture does is it shows you all the victims. So rather than just the closest one, it shows you all of them. It's a little bit of a riff on our original special mode from our tracker DTS, which showed you other victims, but only if you were pointed at them. But now it's 360-degree overview, and it'll just show you. You'll see. So what you do is you press and you hold, because big picture is just a temporary function just to scan the area to see what the metal map looks like. So it's our kind of digital version of using an analog beacon to do your mental mapping or scrolling. So you'll see, you keep that button pressed, and the second photo is of a victim that's 6 meters away. And the third photo is, so it's alternating. There's one that's 6 meters away to the right, and there's one that's 18 meters away straight ahead. And I didn't show the third one, but anyways, and then to go back to search mode, likewise, you just release your thumb. So it's just a temporary function for mental mapping. All right, range. I just wanted to, I've been doing a lot of testing this year, and especially this week, because I came back from ICAR very inspired to get to the bottom of all this electromagnetic interference stuff. But kind of just want to point out the difference between kind of realistic range and marketing range. I think Greg made a good point about search strip width is really the important thing, because a lot of times when people talk about range, they think about optimal range or inline coupling, where the transmit antenna is perfectly lined up in line with the receiving antenna, which is virtually impossible in the field. And likewise, perfectly perpendicular orientation is also extremely unlikely. What is probable, however, is parallel coupling, and that's when the searching transceiver is parallel to the transmitting transceiver, like in the upper right diagram there. So generally speaking, you're supposed to be sweeping your transceiver back and forth during the signal search to try to match the orientation of the transmitter. And once you do match the orientation, then that's kind of what we would call the parallel coupling range, which I think is the most realistic way to measure range. So that's what I was doing all week, but I was doing it with interference sources on the transmitter. But you'll see that in the first column here, I recorded the parallel coupling range of all these various transceivers without a noise source nearby. And generally speaking, these numbers are nothing like what you'll see in the marketing materials. And this is why a search strip width of 40 meters is, generally speaking, I would say, the industry standard, because You'll see some of these numbers get down below 20. So 40-meter surface width is going to be barely enough to make sure you don't miss any spots. So yeah, you don't see any numbers here like 60 or 70 or 80. And these are, okay.
Sorry, Edge, I gotta jump in because we're bumping right up against the hour here, but this is really interesting stuff, and I want to leave time for I wanted to leave time for instructor questions. Instructors, I know you probably have questions, and I know in particular, it'd be great to have more conversation about what we're seeing in this slide that you've got up on the screen right now, Bruce. So what I'm going to do is just in the interest of keeping everybody's nights on track, instructors, I'm going to stay on the line for a few more minutes so that you can type your questions into the Q&A. I'm going to save all of those and share them with all of our panelists. And that way we'll have a chance for folks to ask your questions. And then I'm going to send out a Q&A or an FAQ doc of all of those questions that folks have asked me. If you don't have time to stick on the line and answer or ask your questions in the Q&A, you're welcome to email me. You all have my email address. So I'll make sure that everybody gets that. And also I'm going to ask that, Bruce, I know we didn't get to quite all of your slides, but I'm going to ask that anybody who shared any images or slides or anything, that you share those with me. And I'll compile a folder for instructors so we have some extra resources. So I'm happy to stick on the line. If folks are able to stick around for a couple minutes just to get your questions in, I want to make sure we get some questions answered. And I know some of the panelists had questions for one another that we didn't get time to answer. Sorry, folks. I always think 2 hours is going to be enough time, but there's so much great information here. It's really hard to squeeze everything into 2 hours. So thanks for bearing with me. So I'm going to stick around here for a couple minutes. One thing I am going to do is just put this, I'm going to just put our upcoming webinars up on the screen. So here, Edge, I'm going to bump you so I can jump in on the screen share. Let's see. Okay, so folks, you've probably seen these are our upcoming webinars. The rest of these are all paid webinars, and they're $15 each or $40 for all 4. And that's just so that we can pay those panelists for their time. You all know how to register for these because you managed to get here for this one. So it's just avtraining.org/continuing education. And those are all on that website, as are the registration links. And if you don't mind, if you've got time to just scan this QR code and give us some feedback on our webinar series, we'd love to have your feedback. On how this webinar went, what you learned, what questions you have. You're also welcome to drop questions there. I really want continuing education to not feel like a hoop you have to jump through, but something that actually helps you continue your professional development. So please feel free to drop in any feedback. I read all of it, and I definitely use it to inform next year's CE offerings. So please take a second to do that before you jump off. And I'm here, and anyone else who's here to or who has a couple minutes to stick around, if folks do have questions, you're welcome to raise your hand. But yeah, we'll find a time to do some more direct follow-up. Suddenly all is quiet. All right, I see our participants dropping off here. So like I said, I'm going to save all of these questions, and feel free to drop anything else in the chat. I think maybe I'll give our panelists a chance to just anything else. I really want to thank you all. I really appreciate you all making the time for this, and thanks instructors for showing up for this as well. But panelists, if you don't mind just dropping, if folks have questions directly for you, if you don't mind, whether it's your email or a customer service email, just dropping that in the chat for for folks to see, then they can reach out to you directly with questions. And otherwise, I will follow up with everybody. I think I've made it so you can all chat with everyone. All right. Okay, I can see participants dropping off, so I'm going to go ahead and call it here. So I'm going to just stop recording. Let's see. I'll just end the webinar and then that will stop recording. Okay, thanks everyone so much. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I will follow up in the next couple days. All right, bye.
Putting this together, Emma.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
all.
everybody for joining.